So to understand arrays, let's look at this example program where we're trying to add the marks of 5 students and find the total marks. So we declared 5 variables a1, a2, a3, a4 and a5 as type integer to store the marks of the 5 students. A variable sum which we can use to store the sum of the marks. And in this clip of code we can see that I've assigned the marks 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50 to each of the students, or the variable storing the marks. And in this line we can see that the values of each of the variables a1, a2, a3, a4 and a5 are added together and is assigned to sum. So let's run this program. Compile it. So we can see that the total marks is 150. Now consider the situation that I want 6 students. So to change this program we'll just add a new variable a6. We assign a value to a6 and let it be 60. So we modify this line by adding plus a6. Now we save the program, we compile, we run. So the total marks is 210. Now when we program, we might need to store the values of 7 students, 8 students, 10 students, 100 students, or 1000 students, or 10,000 students. Now assigning 10,000 different variables and using them is really difficult. The C compiler does allow us to do this if we can name all distinct 10,000 values, variable names. But this becomes a really huge problem later on because we have to know the value, what each variable stores, the name of each variable which stores the value of a particular student, and this becomes a really difficult problem. Now to address this, C provides us with an inbuilt data type, or derived data type, sorry, which is called arrays. Now arrays can be declared as like this, a square brackets, and inside let me give 10. So what I did is I've declared an array whose name, or the variable's name, is a. The array is of type int, that means stores values of type int, integers, and its size is 10. That means it can contain 10 different integer values. Now in the case of a normal variable, we can only store a single value in it. We can change the value, of course, but if you say a1, it means 10, or if I change the value, it might be 30 or something on. In the case of array, I can access each distinct value or each distinct 10 values using an index. So the index value is from 0 to n minus 1, where n is the size of the array. So in this case our array size is 10, so our index is from 0 to 9. So if you give a corresponding value or corresponding index value, you can access the value stored in that corresponding index. Let me just remove all these unwanted code. So now you can see that I've added some new code. Now over here I've written a and inside the square bracket 0. So to access each index, we write the array or the variable name, which is a, and in square brackets we give the index value. So index 0, I've stored the value 10, at 1 I've stored 20, at 2 30, 3 40, and at index 4 I've stored the value 50. Now this is how you store the values. Now to access them, just give a square brackets and the corresponding index values. So I've done it here, and that's how you add the values. So let's just run this program. So let's first compile, then run. So as you can see, the sum of those 5 numbers is 150, which is correct. So one of the problems in this way is that I've manually told the index values. Now we can substitute these values with a variable. So if I say a variable as, for example, a code like a of I equal to 10, where I give the value of I equal to 1. So when I do this, I'm accessing the index 1 as i's value is 1 and storing it the value 10. So you can use a for loop to make all this process easy. So to do that, let me remove this code. So now I modify the program a bit more, and I've created a new variable I which stores the index value, and I've created a for loop. Now in this for loop, the value of I goes from 0 to 4, that means less than 5, and I've wrote on a scanf to take an input from the user. So this will take 5 numbers, and to store it to each index of the array A, I've written is &, a square bracket I. So as the value of I changes, the value over here, that means it becomes a of 0, a of 1, a of 2 through each loops, and hence whatever input value I give is stored into corresponding indexes in the array. Similarly, in the sum over here, I'm doing the same process as in the above mentioned loop, and I'm adding it. So because I'm using a for loop, this process becomes much more easy, and remember the code which was a lot of lines, now it becomes smaller. So let's just run this program. Okay, so now I'm gonna input 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. Sum is 150, so the answer is still correct. The same process is happening here. Now let's create a small change. So I'm gonna add a new variable n, and I'm gonna accept n. So scanf quotes %d comma &n, similar. Now instead of going till 5, I'm gonna go to n, the both cases. Now with this changes, as this loop will go to n, I can accept n numbers and store to n distinct indexes in A. But one thing to keep in mind is that A can only store 10 numbers, so the value of n cannot be bigger than 10. So let's run the same program again. Modified program. So compile, run. Now I need to give the value of n, so as before I'll give it 5. Now 5 numbers, I'll give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, we've added 5 numbers. Now let me run the program again. I can give it as 8 this time, n's value. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've added 8 numbers. So by doing this, the program of adding the marks of n students is easy. I don't need to create n different variables. I have an array, and at present the maximum capacity is 10. I could just change this to 100, so we can store 100 values, so 1000 to store 1000 values. This is all handled by the C compiler, so we don't need to bother about it. And arrays are really powerful too. Now one thing to keep in mind is that I've declared the array as int. You can declare it as float, so you can store floating point values. If it's declared as char, you can store character values, and those types of arrays are called strings because it's a set of characters. Now we're going to learn a new concept known as multi-dimensional array, and in specific we're going to learn two-dimensional array. So earlier we've learned how to use an array, and those types of arrays are known as single dimension because we only used one index value to find a particular value stored in that corresponding index in the array. Now in the case of two-dimensional array, which can be declared as, for example, the name is A and we need 2 dimensions and the sizes are 10 and 10 correspondingly, and what this means is that the size of this array is 10 into 10. That means it can store 100 values. So there are these 10 rows, each row having 10 unique values in it. Now we need two index values, so I've given I and j, and two number of limit, that is n and m. Before we only used one, which was n. I've read the values over here and given a nested for loop, because in the iteration process we need to iterate through I, which will start from 0 to m, and then the combination with j from 0 to n. So that'll be like 0 0 0 1 0 2 and 1 0 1 1 and so on. So let's just run this program and see what happens. Okay, so let's give m and n as 2 and 2. Now I'm going to enter the values 1, 2, 3 and 4. The sum is 10. So what happened here is that the outer for loop runs from 1 to m, which is 2. The inner for loop runs from 0 to n, where the n value is also 2. So the values will be like I will be 0, j will be 0, then I will be 0, j will be 1, which then it reaches the limit, so I will become 1 and j will be 0, I will be 1 and j will be 1. So the values are 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1. So these are the corresponding indexes. Now we can access each index by a of square brackets I and j, similarly as we done in the one-dimensional array where we only had I, but now we also have j. Oops. Similarly, we can access the value in the above we wrote to it. Now we can access it over here. Same process is happening here. So in the case of multi-dimensional array, you can, like, for example, store for each dimension of I contains 10 unique values. So each dimension of I could store a particular type of integer, and each value of j is used to go through each of those particular types. Now, as I've said, similarly in one-dimensional, as it's declared int, all the values stored should be int, and if it's float, it will be float. If it's char, it will be multiple characters. So you can store multiple strings if it's a multi-character array. Now in mathematics, we use something known as matrices, a square matrix. So we can represent a square matrix using this process. And so that is a brief introduction into arrays, one dimension to two dimension. And if you want to make a 3-dimension, just add another square bracket, add its size, and that's enough. That's a 3-dimensional array.